Good morning, everybody. It's Ben Jones hanging out here in my coffee workshop on this nice and it is a beautiful sunny. I had to look out the window. Sorry, a beautiful sunny Monday morning here in the Pacific Northwest. Today's the second day of November. It's a Monday. We just had a holiday weekend with Halloween, which then ushers us into, of course, the month of November, which we then have our Thanksgiving and all the subsequent holiday celebrations following through the winter season. So that brings me to something very special. In fact, just one moment. Remember when you were a kid and you would pick up the presents and you'd give it a shake to try to guess what it is, and you're like, oh, that's Legos for sure. This is the grown-up version of Legos, even though you should never stop playing with Legos, even as a grown-up. This is the Batter from Bronson Holiday Blend for 2020. Every year I look forward to Holiday Blend. We do it a different mix every year, different style every year. You never know what you're gonna get. I had a little preview of it last week, got to play with it over the weekend. It's fantastic. As a filter coffee, it's fantastic in the French press. I've brewed it several different AeroPresses. Tomorrow I'm going to taste it as an espresso through several different variations. Of course, I don't have an espresso machine here in the workshop, so we couldn't here. Holiday Blend, delicious. This year, the components are, it's an entirely Central and South American blend. We have some coffee from Guatemala, some coffee from Colombia, and some coffee out of Brazil. It's a sweet, chocolatey, has really fantastic fruit tones to it, some nice spice, nutmeg, a little tiny bit of clove spiciness that I pick up on occasion. It's a perfect dessert coffee. Let's make some up real quick. Let's get this going while I can wax poetic about how much I like. We're going to use a French press. It's a great way to make batches of coffee. If you have a couple of these, it makes it even easier. It's a really full-bodied, great coffee. We're going to start. I have some hot water here. It's always a best practice to preheat your gear before you get going. It is about 52 degrees Fahrenheit in my workshop this morning. So there is a nice chill on this press pot. Of course, if I were to brew coffee into it right away, I would lose all that heat. So I give a little rinse and give this a little dump. There we go. And in a previous video, we chatted about the French press. If you don't have a scale to weigh and you just want to eyeball things, on the Bowden presses, which I think this is the quintessential French press, if you just fill your grounds to where that filter screen hits, which happens to be about the bottom of the handle, that's the right amount for a full press. And then if we lift the screen, the filter, it hits right here at this band at the top of the handle, or sorry, the bottom of the top handle, and that's where we want to add our water. So it just so happens to be, if you're into numbers, I'm using 51 grams of very coarse, chunky coffee straight into here. And then I'm just going to add my water to the bottom of the top band, and that is all we need. When you're rolling with very chunky, large bits of coffee, let yourself splash a little. Pour aggressively. I'm going to pause right there, just before I'm to the top. I want to make sure I get everything wet, so I'm just going to give it a little stir. No need to bloom. Bloom is what we do when we're at risk of letting all the water flood through. If you do bloom this, that's not a big deal. Sometimes it will help to dissipate the overgassiness that would cause too much rise. But there we are. We're sitting right there at the bottom of that band. I'm going to set that down. Now, I'm going to take the plunger, I'm going to set it on top with the little filter. It's kind of like a baleen whale's mouth. I'm going to put that right on the spout. And we're going to do a new method today. I'm going to not press the French press. There's no reason you have to give that a plunge. And I'll show you what's up with that. We're just going to give it a few minutes. I should have done all my chatting now while we're waiting for the brew to happen. So I would clean up my paddle and put that away. So we're going to give that a few minutes to sit and steep. Water temperature for this coffee, if you're really particular about your water, you kind of high 190s are great. With the kettle I use today, it's just a push the button down, it'll come to boil, and then let it sit. So I let it sit for about, just before I started the video, I shut it off, so it was about a minute. There was a lot of water in there. The more water you have in a container, the larger that thermal mass, and then it's going to hold that heat a lot better. A gallon of boiled water is going to stay hot a lot longer than 2 ounces of boiled water. It's just the way it works. We're going to let this sit and steep for another minute. Good chance to talk about grinders. If you can get yourself a quality grinder, that's always a better way to give yourself some versatility. You can switch between brew methods, because then you're not using pre-ground that's going to keep you locked in. It's a great way to experience really fresh coffee. The coffee is going to be a little more fresh, a little more lively when you can grind it closer to brewing. I get into little arguments with some coworkers on occasion about and coffee friends about the necessity of grinding immediately before brew. Some people are very much like, don't you dare grind until the second before you have to. Not that big of a deal. If you can taste the difference between coffee that was ground 5 minutes ago and ground 5 seconds ago, then you have the blessed curse of an immaculately sensitive palate. Yeah, it's important to use fresh ground coffee. You don't want it sitting out for a week pre-ground. If you do get pre-ground coffee from us, because we do if you order your coffee from Batdorf Coffee, we can grind it for you in the little drop-down menu on the website. When you're shopping, you can specify your preferred grind size based on the brew method. If you're doing like a week at a time, perfect, that's great. It all comes down to how you store it. If you're using the bags they come in, I like to just make sure that I fold, well, first of all, when I cut the top off, I cut it as close to the upper seam as I can, which gives me a little more room to roll. Try to get a good seal, pull that down a couple times. It's not going to be airtight, but it's going to be pretty good. The idea is to prevent the exchange of oxygen with the beans. The less air that moves around them, the better. The more temperature stable you can keep it, just a nice even room temperature is a really great way to do it. Our bags do have, if you look on the back, this little one-way valve. This is to allow the beans to degas. The fresh roasted coffee, they get bagged up the same day they're roasted. They're still letting off a lot of carbon dioxide and a lot of gases. We want to let those vent out and escape. If you don't have that valve, this bag will blow up like a balloon. And it's kind of neat, but not really fun. Plus, when it's freshly sealed and you get it in the mail, you can take it and actually I have one bag of unopened coffee right here. So this is one of my favorite things to do. Just take that and just squeeze it, and you get that little burst of fresh roasted coffee smell, and it smells so good. And I love opening my mailbox on coffee day, because when that mailbox smells like coffee, get a little giddy. It's a really good thing. So all that to say, a good grinder is rad. I grind mine just before I use it because I'm making the coffee, so I grind it there when I'm using it, and that's the way to do it. I recommend saving up and investing in a nice grinder. If you're really into pursuing the best coffee you can make at home, a grinder is a life-changing tool that you can get along with a scale. I would prioritize scale, grinder. Gooseneck kettles, though very fun, not essential. All right, it has been just about 6 minutes since I started our coffee. Now remember, we're not gonna plunge this. Normally we would give it a press. You can see I have a cake of coffee up top, and then we have a lot of the liquid. We can just take this and we can just pour just like that. The cake itself will flow toward the back. We still have the metal filter screen in place. So it kind of begs the question, like, what's the real purpose of the filter screen? It's to hold back the coffee, but what's the plunger for? Well, I suppose it will isolate the grounds faster and let you pour out a little more quickly. But it's just something to play with, something fun. You know, let's take this and we'll pour this into the glass container so you can see how thick and delicious this is. With the French press, we do recommend decanting it as soon as you can. But if you let it sit in there, not that big a deal. It will, when we don't have a lot of movement of water, it's not going to be pulling out as much. So I'm getting tired of holding that, so I'm going to plunge this down. We'll go and speed up that isolation of the grounds. Let that flow out a little faster and easier if you do it this way, but there's a school of thought, a group of folk out in the world who are advocates for not plunging the coffee. So we now have holiday blend made through the French press, chocolatey sweet, nice dried fruit tones. So think about like really that kind of dark fleshed dried fruits, rich plums, raisins, need some currant. Top, think about some nutmeg, some spice, all the kind of holiday spices that you would expect in a dessert. And with the French press, you get a nice thick body. Renee's saying she doesn't think she can wait that long for the morning pour. I agree. Like I said, a lot of the plunger up, plunger down is kind of an academic, somewhat esoteric way to think about coffee, but that's the way things advance. And that's the way we discover new things, is by just playing with things that don't make any sense. All we really care about: treat the people around you well, treat the people who aren't around you well, enjoy the coffee you drink. And if you haven't checked out batdorfcoffee.com, we've got a lot of coffees up there. Most recent addition is the Holiday Blend for 2020. It's a Central and South American blend, Guatemala, Colombia, and Brazil. Send some to your friends and family who we can't be with this holiday season. Know that you're drinking a good cup together. Thank you for joining. It's good to see everybody back. It's another week. Let's do this. Enjoy your coffee. That's a good cup. Most of the time I don't drink French press just because I tend away from heavy-bodied coffees, rather heavy-bodied brew methods. But it really does feel like a good hug in the morning. The texture is nice. Texture is real pleasant. You feel that grit, you feel some of that, the fine particles that are down in there. Again, if you want to avoid that texture, go and get something with a paper filter and give that a brew that way. All right, I said I was going to be gone, so I'm going to go enjoy this now. Take care.